Hello chess friends and welcome to Azadov's chess channel and welcome to the Everything Masters tournament in 2020. So far we have reached the final stage but also we have reached the game for the third place, and we're starting now this last days of this very cool tournament with a great match game between Maxim Vachilagrov and Danil Dubov. So Maxim Vachilagrov and Danil Dubov lost their games in the semifinals against Teimur Radjabov and Levon Aronian. Still, these guys, Maxim and Danil Dubov, gave us really such great joy in the tournament. They played really sharp openings. They played really attractive games, and I think the decision that the organizers made to let them play the game for the third place is, I think, a great decision, because still we can see a couple more games by Maxim Vachilagrov and Danil Dubov. In this finals, we have so far a very intense battle between Radjabov and Aronian. They're playing a little bit calm and maybe slightly boring games. The two draws have been played so far, but of course Maxim Vachilagrov and Danil Dubov, no draws were played so far in this match game. Let's check out now one game in which Maxim Vachilagrov had the white pieces and opened with the move e4. Danil Dubov responds with the move e5, knight to f3, we have knight to c6 and bishop to b4, the Italian game. After knight to f6, the two knights defense, and now d3 played by Maxim Vachilagrov. Normal ideas: we want to develop our dark blue bishop, we want to also secure our king by castling. We have now bishop to e7. We have really this most often played, I think, line. We could also sometimes see this Gioco piano setup, but it's a pragmatic idea here by Danil Dubov. First, we keep our pieces compact in the game, and knight to c3. So still nothing went wrong for both sides. This position has been also reached millions of times in chess history. So here d6 developing, of course, the light square bishop. There are also some pinning possibilities because the bishop has left a little bit here the defense of the knight. So here after the move a4, Maxim Vachilagrov tries to stop the queen side, tries to create sort of a blockade on the queen side, because in some occasions this bishop on c4 could be kicked away with a6 b5 ideas, and then black could also make progress with the move b4. So here castling played by Danil Dubov. We have castling also by Maxim Vachilagrov, and now h6. This move h6 is again also a pragmatic idea. We are not allowing some bishop to g5 ideas. If bishop to e3 happens, then this bishop could be kicked away with knight to g4. So again, also a very often played line. So nothing, as I said, went wrong for both sides, but this game will be dynamic, though. Don't be scared. This game will be really a nice tactical battle. So h3 also here by Maxim Vachilagrov. We have now a position in which both players, I think, have difficulties to develop this bishop somewhere. These bishops are not so active, although they're controlling good diagonals, but you cannot really include them into the game. Now in the game, bishop to e6 was played by Danil Dubov, which is one of the most natural ideas of the Italian game, because after bishop takes e6 and f takes e6, we can notice, of course, that Danil Dubov has the weak e6 pawn, but this pawn e6 has also its strength, because many times in the static center setups, what I mean about the static center setup is when you have such a pawn structure in the center, when you have maybe two advanced pawns, they're blocking each other out, then basically what you want to do is to occupy this square supported by this pawn. So it means white would, of course, love to occupy this d5 and f5 square. On the other hand, black would love to, of course, occupy the d4 and f4 square. Black would love, for instance, to cement maybe one of these knights here. White would also love to maybe cement one minor piece here, especially on this f5 square. This could be very dangerous. And for instance, white manages to cement the knight on f5, then the position could be very dangerous for black. So that's why bishop to e6. Okay, after bishop to e6, we have f takes e6, but now you see black is controlling at least this two squares. So there are weaknesses, but there are also strengths of this particular line. So here knight to e2. Here Maxim Vachilagrov is trying to maneuver the knight. There are, of course, new weaknesses in the position, because you have played f takes e6. Now there is a weak g6 square in front of the king, so maybe we could maneuver one of these knights and get it to g6, but it's still a long path. Of course, black can play also some counterplay ideas. Here a5, we have knight to g3, and now queen to e8. This is a very good move, I think, by Danil Dubov. He wants to maneuver the queen more actively here to the king side, maybe queen to f7, queen to g6, and for instance a positional idea could be knight to h5. Then after knight to h5, then the queen could come also very active into the game. So c3, Maxim Vasilyev is preparing a d4 move. He wants really to break now the position because he has a little bit a cemented position here in the center. Black has, of course, a dominant position in the center because black has 3 pawns versus 2 pawns on these two files, of course, in the center, the D and E file. So that's why Maxim Vasilyev is trying to break the position in the center. So queen to f7, we have bishop to e3, and now king to h8. Played by Danil Dubov, also pragmatic idea, getting the king out of the range, but also maybe preparing something like rook to g8, and then trying to push maybe g5, h5, g4, h4, and similar ideas. So in the game, knight to h2 was played by Maxim Vasilyev, which maybe was his first slight inaccuracy, maybe something like queen to b3. At least the queen would be a little bit stuck here on f7. The queen couldn't left the defense of the e6 square. Also, we're targeting the b7 square, so that's why it could be a very interesting idea. Black, I think, would be forced to play something like rook to b8, and then rook to e1 gives us, I think, a good setup to continue from. Maybe something like knight to d7 can be played, and now d4. That would be, I think, a good setup here for Maxim Vasilyev. But after the move knight to h2, here you see you haven't battled on the light squares. Now Danil Dubov pushed the pawn immediately in the center. We have queen to e2, and now rook to d8. We're preparing also some d4 pawn breakthroughs in the game. Rook to d1, and now Danil Dubov has, I think, a comfortable game. The position is about equal, but still I like a little bit more black's position. Black's pieces seem to me a little bit more active, especially now the queen on the g file. You see, we have placed the queen where the king is. If anything opens, if the pawn structure splits somehow in front of the king, then the king, of course, could be in danger. So knight to f3, preparing knight to h4, kicking away the queen from this very active square. And now knight to d7. That's a very nice move, very nice counterplay here, because knight to h4 is not possible. The bishop is covering that very important square. So king to h2, and we have now rook to f7. Danil Dubov sees, of course, his opportunities on the f file. That's the only open file on the board, so he doubles up the rooks. Very nice idea. And now here queen to c2, played by Maxim Vasilyev. You see, Maxim has troubles to get the queen somehow into the game. He probably realized now that he could have had some kind of a counterplay here on the queen side with queen to b3, queen to if b6 happens, maybe queen to b5, attacking this weak knight on c6 and similar ideas. But it comes a little bit too late, because here Danil Dubov is simply much more active. Rook from f to d8. Also bishop to d6 is a very nice idea. Then we will control here a very important diagonal. Then a d4 pawn breakthrough will be very interesting. After c takes d4, e takes d4, you see we have opened the long diagonal for the bishop, and the queen is already there, so this could be also very dangerous. So after the move rook from d to f8, we have queen to b3, and now Danil Dubov plays immediately d4, breaks the position. We have bishop to c1, and now knight to c5, simply attacking the queen. Queen to b7, maybe a slightly better choice here for Maxim Vasilyev. At least it's some kind of a counterplay. We're playing against this knight on c6. Maybe white can take, but we can also take out the knight, and I think this could be playable. But here, after the move bishop to c1, here comes now really the master attack by Danil Dubov. He plays the move knight to c5, attacking the queen. We have queen to c2, and now comes a stunner. Rook takes f3. This is simply Danil Dubov style. He sacrifices the rook for the exchange, but it's not something that should surprise us. I think this is a good sacrifice. It's not one of the sacrifices we have also seen by Danil Dubov in the tournament, where he played basically inaccurate sacrifice, inaccurate positional exchange and similar stuff. This is a correct sacrifice. It opens the position in front of the king here after g takes f3, rook to f3, and now rook to g1. A new mistake by Maxim Vasilyev, because he should have played simply queen to e2 and trying to hang on to this position. At least he could counterplay here against the rook. Again, the rook would be challenged. I think when you get attacked in chess, it's very important to counter-attack somehow, and queen to e2 comes with that idea. Here, a very interesting line that's suggested by the engine is to play the move rook to f4 and giving up another rook. Here, after bishop to f4, e takes f4, and maybe knight to h1. Here, knight takes a4 could be very interesting, and then you see we could also control here knight to d4, because c takes d4 wouldn't be a good possibility, because then the knight comes very actively into the game. You see, you have to move the queen. This is a very mobile pawn. Knight to f3 is a possibility, so you see how dangerous really this position can be. Although you're down 2 exchanges, you're down 2 rooks for 2 minor pieces, but still a very active setup here for black. So rook to g1, we have queen to f7, attacking of course the f2, rook to g2, and now bishop to h4, simply continue the attack. We have king to g1, and now b6, fixing the position on the queen side. Black is slightly better here. If maybe white plays this now game very accurate, this could be a drawish line, but Danil Dubov, I think, finds always this ideas. Now queen to e2 is a little bit too late. Maybe king to h2, simply getting out of this mess, trying to hang on to this position, trying to regroup, maybe even something to play rook to g1, then afterwards maybe targeting the g7 could be also very interesting idea. But after the move queen to e2, here again Danil Dubov simply takes out this very weak pawn. We have knight to f5, cutting off the connection between the queen and the rook, but it's not a problem because we can still take. Rook takes f2, rook takes bishop to f2, queen to f2, and now after e takes f5, we have a new position in which again black is down the exchange, but with really great counterplay possibilities with this pawn structure, with some extra pawns, with these two very active knights. We have e takes f5, but now d takes c3, b takes c3, knight to c3 comes again with a tempo against the rook, rook to e1, knight to d5. You see, this knight will find a way into the game. They're very dangerous. We could also search for knight to f4 possibilities, but so far this f4 square is covered very well. But as a long-term plan to cement one of these knights is also a strategical plan here for black. So queen to g2, knight to b4, played by Danil Dubov, attacking the d3 weakness. We have rook to f1, and now you see how these knights come very actively into the game. You cannot protect everything. Queen to a8, another problem. King to h7, and now queen to d5, threaten of course some f6 ideas in the game. Queen to f6, blocking out this potential pawn breakthrough. Here h4, bishop to d2, and now knight to c2, cementing both of these knights. These knights are very well placed, they're fixed, and we have also opportunities to simply push the pawns further. We have now here 2 connected pass pawns, which I think are simply too much to handle. h4, again, nothing special is going on here for white. White doesn't have good activities in the game. a4, you see Danil Dubov simply pushes the pawn further. We have queen to g4, a2, bishop to c3, and now after the move queen to g5 in this position, Maxim Vachilovgrad resigned, because if you trade off, for instance, the pieces, there's nothing that you can do, because knight to b3 will happen, and we would then have a great control of the a1 square. We could promote, and then white has to give up decisive material. White would be forced to give up the bishop and the rook for a pawn and maybe a knight, and black would then continue with an extra piece. And Maxim Vachilovgrad of course realized that and simply resigned. So great attack again by Danil Dubov. He won also the second game, which is really incredible. He needs only now 1 draw out of the 2 next games, and he'll be the winner of the day 1 of the game, the match game for the 3rd place. So congratulations so far to Danil Dubov. He played an outstanding tournament, as I said, and we'll see. I hope also that Maxim Vachilovgrad can also make something happen, because we need a strong Maxim Vachilovgrad, because we want to see also some cool games in the continuation of this match game. So okay, I hope that you enjoyed this game. Meanwhile, you can watch my coverage of this Everything Masters tournament so far, and as I said, we're following basically this game Radjabov-Aronian. So far 2 draws have been played. We'll see. This is really intense battle between these sharp players, Radjabov and Aronian. So okay, check out my coverage of this tournament so far. Here's the link, and if you want to see maybe the best chess games of all times, check out my best chess games of all time series. Here's also the link, and if you want to see maybe see the engines playing in their best chess games, check out my commented chess games played by computer series. Here's also the link, and if you like this content, you can also subscribe to my channel. See you soon with some more videos, and chess is the best, of course.